Okay, hey, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight for our wonderful, wild adventure into Prohibition era North Bergen. This is by far my favorite part of this town's history. Most of you have come and witnessed a lot of the really interesting stuff we talk about, a lot of the details of this town. Most people always get mad at me when I say this. Battle of Bulls Ferry, I love it, but not as interesting as this. We're going to go through this wild ride together of somebody who really, for some of the people who live in this town have been lifelong residents of this town, they know the name, right? The Affuso name is a very prominent name in town. But what we don't know is George. And George is very, very, let's just say, iconic in the world of Prohibition era United States. So let's get this show rolling here. Now, listen, our story is going to start right at the onset of Prohibition, okay? And it's going to start with this unassuming character, right? George is kind of like your run-of-the-mill guy. His story, though, is going to develop very quickly. There's going to be a lot of twists and turns in this story, and it ends in a bloody disaster. The town of North Bergen during this time, it is not for the meek. This town was extremely rough in the post-World War I era, like all the way up until World War II. This was, you know, picture the roughest of the roughest, the toughest of the toughest. That's the kind of vibe this town had. Again, prohibition is going to cause obviously a black market of liquor dealing to develop in the shadow of New York City, right? And to most residents and most people in this area, they don't realize how integral North Bergen was to this kind of liquor dealing underworld, and how it is all going to flow, no pun intended with that one, but flow directly through George Affuso. Okay, so this is, you know, listen, we're going to take a look at how many speakeasies there were in northern Hudson County. Okay, I just want to put it out this way. I lost count at one point, and the program I was using said I was using so much bandwidth on their website that I needed to pay for an upgrade to continue tagging places. So I will crack this open. I kid you not, this is legit. That's how many speakeasies there are in this town, in this area. There are bars everywhere, and they are all known. These are documented on insurance maps. They're reported in the newspaper, okay? That they're in police reports of what's going on in this area. Now, in North Bergen, I mean, most of the bars were right on that border, right? Last time we met, we talked about our friend down in Shadyville, right? Patty Gould, the only police officer in Shadyside during Prohibition. There was about 9 bars in Shadyside by themselves that we know of. Okay, when you go around the rest of this town, they're kind of spread out a little bit, right? And then once you get into Guttenberg, I don't know how anybody's liver survived in Guttenberg during Prohibition. There was a bar literally like 15 feet away from each other, every street. West New York was a little more secretive with their bars. There weren't a lot that we came across and a lot that I stumbled across. When you get back into North Bergen, those midtown folks, man, they know how to have a good time. Over here, Union City was, it's Union City. It was a good time in Union City. They did not stop. Weehawken, they were a little more uptight, and there was only a few in Weehawken. West Hoboken was a town that today we would call that downtown Union City. They were also extremely having a good time down there. And then, you know, you get into Hoboken, and I just don't even bother. There was just too many. But George Affuso is going to be tied to every single one of these. And he either supplied them alcohol, stole alcohol from them, or basically ratted them out to the FBI, right? That's the kind of power this guy had. So let's jump back into this, and we'll do a little history lesson here. So the 18th Amendment, right? Okay. This passes on January 17th 1920. Okay. Now, the wordage of this is, after 1 year from ratification of this article, the manufacture, sale, transportation of intoxicating liquors within, the importation therefore into, or the exportation thereof from the United States and all territories subject to the jurisdiction thereof for beverage purposes is hereby prohibited. In plain English, the federal government said no one's allowed to have any fun anymore. Okay, so let's build into this era that we're talking about. Okay, now the jungle, again, a very kind of prominent name depending where you're from in North Bergen. Today, this is kind of a long forgotten neighborhood. This is going to be, if I had to mark it off anywhere, 61st Street to about 58th Street, Kennedy Boulevard to about Meadowview Avenue. So if you know where like the rec center is in North Bergen, it's the neighborhood next to the rec center. Okay. Now, this is where George Affuso's story starts. Okay. He's born in 1894, right, to Italian immigrants, Paolo and Lucia. Okay. This is their second son. Okay. Affuso lived in the jungle, right? This area was basically defined by very hard working class immigrants. Okay. And they called it home. Now, this community, like all immigrant communities, was made up of people all chasing this elusive American dream. And George desperately wanted that dream. Okay. George, like all those in that area, he would have attended Lincoln School. Okay. So again, that's where he's going to get his formal education. There he learns the golden rule. All right. But he's also educated by living in the jungle, right? He's educated by people who are experiencing hardships, who are doing anything to make a buck. And he is getting that kind of school of hard knocks education as well. So we don't know a lot about his early life. Most of what we do know about it comes from later reports about some of his exploits, we'll call them. And that kind of doesn't fill in a lot of puzzle pieces. What we do know is his first arrest was at 15 years old, right? What it was for, it doesn't tell us. It just says he was arrested at 15 years old. And that was it. Looking at reports and newspaper articles from that time, chances are it was probably for fighting. Okay, the jungle had a really weird reputation for fighting. In fact, they held a yearly contest called King of the Jungle, where it was a bare knuckle boxing fighting competition to see who was the king of the neighborhood, right? And one guy won it for like 30 years in a row, who ironically owned a bar as well. But we'll get into that down the road, okay? His father, again, kind of did odd jobs. He was a day laborer, didn't really have a career, no stable income coming in, okay? Times were tough, all right, for the Affuso family, right? George, his older brother, John, they were expected to go to work as well, okay? They were going to school and then going to work, again, doing these odd jobs. By 1917, George catches a break, okay? And he becomes the 31st police officer in the North Bergen Police Department, badge number 31, 31st officer the town ever had. He's there for a year before all hell breaks loose, okay? Now, before we talk, this is the jungle. This is what this area where George lived looked like, okay? This is the corner today, presently, of Durham Avenue, right? Today, if you go there, it's Meadowview Village, right? None of this remains. This was all leveled in about 1944-ish for that development that's there, okay? The houses, you had some houses that were, you know, traditionally built, right? However, you had shanty houses as well, okay? And this is really bizarre to think of because we all know the town today, right? You know, and you know, in its recent history, like we would never expect to see anywhere that looked like this, okay? So again, this is his life, all right? And again, these shack homes, really basic construction, one room, no heat, no indoor plumbing, right? This is, you know, today we would, you know, somebody would be like, oh, it's glamping, right? But this is hard living for these folks, okay? Now, here's where we get into trouble. The Gaffney incident. So here we have an image. This is George Gaffney, this fella right here. And a gang called the Gopher Gang, okay? They were based out of New York City. So now how does this gang from New York City get involved with a cop here in North Bergen? Well, I'm sorry, George, I call him George Gaffney. Sorry, Vincent Gaffney, right, is one of these influential racketeers in New York, okay? Part of the Gopher Gang based out of Hell's Kitchen. So he is known as a murderer, right? And he escapes the tombs, right? The infamous tombs in New York City. He's one of the first people to ever escape. He gets out in 1918 and he's on the run for a while. He ends up shacking up with some woman from North Bergen, right? Thinks he's going to make his way out of there. However, the North Bergen police catch him, right? They figure out that he's there. Now, upon his capture, a conspiracy comes out, and George is going to be at the center of this conspiracy. So when Gaffney, he's turned over to the NYPD, first the NYPD really they do a number on him. They rough him up, right? And in the process of roughing him up, a pistol falls out of his pocket, okay? So the New York City police turn around and say, listen, he's got a revolver on him with extra rounds. Like, what is going on here? What happened while he was in the North Bergen Police Department? What was going on? Gaffney and the NYPD both are going to say a North Bergen cop armed him, okay? This is all going to fall on George Affuso. All of it, okay? Leonard Marcy, who's the chief of police, he defends Affuso. This is a young kid, right? Young guy, that's a cop, okay? And he suspended him, all right, for, and this is a direct quote, for courtesy's sake, right? Lieutenant George Cash said, I've known Affuso a long time, and he's perfectly trustworthy, right? These are the guys he works with. Cash went out to claim that the NYPD is trying to scapegoat him because, again, and I quote, Gaffney made them look like boobs, right? You don't get insults like that in newspapers anymore, right? But Captain John Seaman, right? NYPD said, Affuso's record is one which we can be proud of. Okay, so Affuso is respected amongst the fellow officers here. Okay, Affuso even himself is like, I didn't do anything, right? He claims he didn't even speak to Gaffney, right, when he was in the cells, right? Marcy placed the blame on the NYPD, which collected Gaffney. Now, over the next several days, the Gaffney incident, as it becomes referred to in the papers, it's becoming investigated by the county prosecutor, Pierre Garvin. Now, Garvin he's got a big chip on his shoulder, right? We're in this era where like they know prohibition is coming on. Garvin saw what was going on in this county, and like he's coming down hard on every criminal that crosses his path. Okay. Garvin then promises if enough evidence is provided, Affuso is going to face a jury. Okay. Again, they claim that Affuso passes the revolver to Gaffney. Okay. Detective McGann and Detective Barrett of the NYPD, who found the pistol on Gaffney, recalled seeing Affuso act strangely near the door of the holding cell. Okay. They claim there was no need for Affuso to be near the prisoner, as the detectives were also stationed outside the cell. Okay. We get into a real battle of who saw what. It's a he said situation. The testimony from the Manhattan DA gives Gaffney's confession, which he claimed Affuso gave him the gun, and they enter that as evidence. Okay. Now, because the stories of the detectives never changed, along with the DA's testimony, Garvin, he's like, I'm going to bring this guy to trial. Okay. In an attempt to sway public opinion, the township committee, right, headed by Mayor Nolan, he's like, no, we dismiss all charges in the township against this guy. All right. There's no crime here. There's nothing happened. Okay. We're going to go to the first of many trials now. Okay. For young George. So he's going to go to court February 20th, 1919. Okay. After the first day of the trial, the jury is in complete disagreement about Affuso's role. Right? They don't believe Garvin. Some of them believe Affuso. On the second day of this trial, there's a real courtroom bombshell. Okay. Man by the name of Peter Costello, guy from Hoboken, comes forward and says, I'm the one that gave Gaffney the gun. Okay. Weeks before he was arrested. Okay. Which means, to some extent, somebody who arrested Gaffney didn't do their job. Right? The jury then kind of looks at this. There's 24 hours, but they never agree and they show no signs of breaking a deadlock. So Affuso was a free man, all right, for now, and there was a scheduled retrial. set for later that year. However, Affuso's troubles are not over, okay? He is going, okay, to return to work. Now, while he's at work, there's another incident. However, this time it's with a fellow police officer, okay, with Frederick Geiger. Geiger accuses Affuso of passing the gun to Gaffney, okay? This leads to a scrap, a fight, and this is where we're gonna see like that street education from the jungle come out. The beating is so bad, Affuso leaves Geiger in the hospital for several weeks, and they have to implant a metal plate in his head, right? So, like, Affuso shows no mercy on this guy, okay? Another police officer who saw the fight sided with Affuso and said, listen, Geiger started the fight, right? And there's no question, he had it coming, okay? Affuso, though, is going to get his day in court again. He faces 2 separate charges in one day. Okay, he is going to go for the Gaffney incident and then for charges that Geiger brings up against him, right? An assault charge. He's acquitted of both charges. Okay, at this point, he is going to leave the police department and he is going to really become, in some way, like a local hero in North Bergen. People are going to look at this guy, and again, you put yourself in this time frame, in this 1919, 1920, people aren't working. This guy stands up to the system. He wins, right? He's like a folklore legend, right, to these people that are here now. So here's what he does. He opens up the 101 ranch, okay? So he purchases a storefront, which would have been by about 59th Street and Kennedy Boulevard. Today, it's a parking lot, unfortunately, today. The original structure is gone. He turns it into the 101 ranch. It's a very well-known bar, okay? Affuso fixed it up with present amenities. And in one advertisement we found, it said, it's the largest dance floor in North Bergen. Now, I looked at the old maps. The structure was probably no bigger than this room, but it's the largest dance floor in North Bergen, okay? Business was good for George. The bar was popular watering hole, and busy every night of the week, okay? It was here that he's going to become a major player in the beer running game that was starting to be established in preparation for Prohibition, right? These folks, especially bar owners, they understood what the federal government was up to. They were trying to secure their own kind of financial future. How are we going to get through this? Now, a lot of people at the time didn't think Prohibition was going to last very long. They thought maybe like a year, maybe 2 years, right? It goes on for several years. So they're not even quite prepared for what they think is coming. But he's already preparing. Where can I store this stuff? Where can I make this stuff? Who's going to give it to me for a good price? And how can I resell it to these other bars? Okay. The bad news is that Garvin has it out for Affuso, right? Garvin looked bad. Not once, not twice, but 3 times Garvin looks bad that he can't put Affuso away. So, unable to accept the verdict, the 101 Ranch was first raided on the first time on June 8th of 1921. And they raid this thing constantly, especially because of what happens the first time. Okay. This is one of the first Prohibition raids held in the entire township. Okay. The raid doesn't find, well, the raid was to find alcohol. However, they couldn't find any alcohol. What they found was a bunch of guys gambling. Okay. Affuso is never charged with hosting a gambling resort because he's not there at the time. However, his employees, Joe Maltese, right, guy from North Bergen, and Andrew Hunter of West New York, well, they're there, okay? In fact, he's, again, never charged, never implicated. And as both of these guys, they're like, nah, man, it was us. We ran the whole thing. So Affuso's got guys around him who are willing to take the fall for him already, okay? Like I said, he is a local hero to these people. So he's got the formations of a gang happening already. Now, it was then that Affuso began to emerge as this de facto kingpin in North Bergen and in northern Hudson County with the Prohibition underworld happening here. So again, you got a guy who's got a lot of credibility as being this tough guy, right? Did he help Gaffney escape? Was he just a good guy? Did he get railroaded, right? We know he put a beating on Geiger, right? We know we have loyal people to him now. Right? What is going to happen here? So We go to his third trial, of course. That's what happens next. Now, in the fall of 1923, and again, in between 21 and 23, Affuso's name is in the Jersey Journal like every couple of days. Not for anything good, right? He faces a judge because, well, he gets into an accident on Kennedy Boulevard in 1921. He gets out of the car and he beats two guys up on Kennedy Boulevard, right? Judge Charles Egan of Jersey City let Affuso go because he's like, listen, he's got a lot of ties to the community. He's not really a threat. But he did say, listen, you get in trouble one more time, you're going to spend 6 months in county jail. Okay. The appearance would not be delayed. So in June of 23, Affuso's dubbed a bad man in the newspapers because he's charged in between waiting for trial with highway robbery. Okay. Affuso and his guys, they were caught sticking up multiple delivery trucks on Hudson Boulevard, Hackensack, and Patterson Plank Road. Okay. According to the reports, what they would do is have a car break down, and then when the gentleman driving the truck would come out to help them, they would stick them up and rob them, right? A lot of these happened in broad daylight. Like, this wasn't like in the middle of the night, you can't really see. No, this was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon they were doing this. Affuso, along with his gang, right, Joe Maltese, and now they added Tim O'Mara by another North Bergen guy, they're all held without bail, okay? The trial is going to be moved to January of 24, in which Affuso is found guilty and sentenced to 2 to 3 years in the state penitentiary down in Trenton. Now, the sentence was not given for the 23 robberies, but given for the 21 assaults, okay? And due to Affuso's rise to power, and again, this was due to that rise, right? Because he is like a major player, right? The judge knows, like, if I throw the book at this guy for, robbing these people, like, we gotta cover our tracks here. Now, before he goes away to jail, we get into what I like to call jungle warfare, because this is one of my favorite parts of this story. At this point, Affuso is in complete control of all the booze flowing in and out of the county. Everything goes through him, okay? He's controlled the stills that are operated in the area, and he dictates who and where alcohol is going to go to at this point. He sets up his kind of base of operation is where he's from. Sets it up in the jungle. His home was on Newkirk Avenue, and his business was right across the street on Hudson Boulevard. It's going to serve as the center of operations for the Affuso gang. Now there, Affuso is going to go to war with that guy, the king of the jungles, right? This guy who won like 30 bare knuckle boxing fights in a row, 30 years of bare knuckle boxing fights. Guy by the name of Albert Runny. Okay, now a lot of people may know that name because there was Runny's Inn on 51st Street. That's that Runny family, okay? So he's going to fight him over control of the wells that are in the jungles, right? He's trying to get control over the water because, well, if you're going to make booze, you need water, and you need a lot of it, okay? The water war is going to lead to just all the Affusos and all the Runnies ending up in jail at one point during this. They're all in and out of jail over the course of several months. Al's daughter, Ida, she's dubbed the princess of the jungle, okay? She even gets arrested, right? Because she is in an altercation with one of the, Affusos. Cops come, they arrest everybody, okay? The fighting was mainly street fights, and the residents of the area, which was the scariest part for them, they're forced to choose a side. Do you side with the Affusos, or do you side with the Runnies, right? So the neighborhood gets divided. So when the dust settles, Affuso controls the water and the respect of the residents in the area, right? And this only propels his operations, right? So not to just sit back and be like, all right, I got control of this area, let me go to jail. He's like, no, I'm going to pull off another robbery. So he heads up to Palisades Park, all right? And his influence in the area is stronger than it's ever been. And the law is going to catch up with him, though. So he's released on bail from North Bergen on a $10,000 bail release from North Bergen, okay? While he's out on bail, they look to make one more big score before he's sent to Trenton, okay? Affuso and his boys are going to go and break and rob a real estate agency in Palisades Park. The Pal Park police, when called, they get there, there's an exchange of words with Affuso, and this comes out of the reports of what the police officer said happened. He said, Affuso looked at him and said, hadn't I better look for safer quarters if there's going to be any shooting, right? So at this point, Powell Park is a pretty sleepy town, right? Not a lot of problems up there. And here you got this guy coming in, and he's like, yo, listen, there's going to be a shootout, man. I better get some cover. To that point, the Powell Park police kind of back up, and Affuso jumps in a car and takes off. As they're leaving, this chase it's like a movie. Affuso takes random corners. He's speeding down side streets. He causes a few police cars to even crash. Affuso is then arrested at his home by Lieutenant Detective Cash, the same guy who defends him in 1918, makes the arrest. Affuso is going to spend 5 years in a Trenton jail cell. Okay. His operations, well, they fall to the rivals, especially a gentleman by the name of James Egan, no relation to the judge at all. That would have been an even better twist of this story, but no, he's not related to the judge. And all he could do was get information on what was going on and just wait to get out. That's all he could do. He returns to North Bergen in the fall of 1929. So the return of King George, okay? Affuso's return was not a quiet one, okay? Upon his return to the jungles, he's met with a bunch of fanfare, and as it's reported, the entire neighborhood came out to greet him. The Jersey Journal reports that this party lasted for 3 days, okay? During his time away, the area grew more and more dilapidated, and was kind of, the discussion was going on that we're going to redevelop this area, okay? So now Affuso's back. The people of the area kind of have this feeling like, all right, he's back. We're safe now. He's going to take care of us. And then George does what he does best, I guess. He goes on another robbery. So he robs a place called the Bergen Electric Company, which today would be at 54th and Kennedy Boulevard. So the company specifically picked North Bergen to move to. They said, look, we're going to employ year-round 280 people, right? So this was a big boost to the neighborhood's economy, right? A lot of the people who worked there actually were living in the jungle, right? So these are like Affuso's people. So 3 men enter the Bergen Electric Factory. They're armed, carrying a gun. They go into the factory's office. They steal radio tubes, which is what Bergen made, and they take $11,000, which made up the payroll at the time for the company. The money was later found in an apartment in the Bronx, and the radio tubes, well, they're discovered in a Affuso store located right next to his bar, okay? The store sold kind of odds and ends. It seems with the descriptions of it, it's kind of almost like a pawn shop kind of deal. He sold whatever he could get his hands on and would buy whatever he could get his hands on. So Affuso's picked up by the North Bergen police, and they label him the finger man who engineered the burglary. The Jersey Journal will report extensively on the incident and made no attempt to hide Affuso's past. So this is directly out here. Affuso has a criminal record, according to the police, and served 2 terms in a penitentiary. Is reputed to be a hijacker. Okay, they continued. Affuso's record, according to the North Bergen police files, dates back to September 1910. 16 years old. Okay, he was fined $5 for disorderly conduct. Next year, he got a suspended sentence on the same charge. And in 1918, he was held by a grand jury for assault and battery. There was no disposition. Then again, they report some action from 1920, where he was arrested for maintaining a disorderly house and for violating prohibition laws. But the charges were dropped, all right, as he was held for the grand jury. In 1922, he is arrested for driving an auto while drunk, reckless driving, driving without a license, and assault and battery. The first 3 charges were dismissed, and the 4th was dropped after being referred to the grand jury. Then they report on this 1923 incident. He is sentenced to 3 years in the state penitentiary for highway robbery, but serves less than a year. In February of the next year, he is again arrested for burglary and safecracking in Bergen County and sentenced to 3 years in prison. So, I mean, criminally speaking, the guy's got one heck of a resume, all right? Now, what happens is this. The Jersey Journal continues that he must be resorting to hijacking as early as the winter, because that's when alcohol consumption falls. Gets cold, people don't go out anymore, right? So they even note that that's his main source of revenue. Along with Affuso, 5 other members of his gang, they're all arrested. One of the men explained how Affuso's restaurant, which is now called The Rendezvous, was where the heist was planned. During the investigation, Affuso enters a not guilty plea at the county courthouse. His bail set at $15,000, which would be the equivalent of $266,000 today. And it was posted, right? Affuso had that kind of cash laying around, okay? 6 days later, the stock market crashes and the Great Depression is here, right? So to make things even crazier, right? Now you have people that are desperate for work, desperate for money, okay? And this guy who is looked at as the savior of these people. So what happens? So while he's waiting for trial, Affuso sees the writing on the wall and he kicks his business into high gear, right? Prohibition is still being enforced, but with the Depression coming, beer and alcohol, they become an in-demand provision. Okay, people are trying to stock up, especially on liquor. So he then gets linked to these kind of a truck with 5.5 barrels of 5% beer. Now, to relate that to what is a 5% beer, it'd be like the equivalent of like a Budweiser or a Heineken today, right? But made in like George Affuso's like basement, okay? He stopped outside a cafe on Bergen Avenue in West New York. Now, how's he linked to the truck? His brother was driving it, okay? It's a family affair, this endeavor. Now, there's also another truck found with 28 half barrels of beer found in Union City, abandoned shortly after the truck was found in West New York. Okay, several days later, another truck with 177 barrels of beer is found again with an Affuso driving it. Okay, it was no secret George was the man in control of Northern Hudson County, and anything that could have been needed or wanted, he was going to get it. Okay, but there is still competition in the area, and Affuso wanted absolute control, right? Now, we looked at that map earlier, and we saw there are hundreds of bars in this area, okay? And there are even several breweries in operation here that are making ice cream now, right? Yet magically, there's still beer flowing around town, right? Now, during 1930, Affuso began to retake control, right, of North Bergen, the people of the jungle, right, in the surrounding neighborhoods. He's not a criminal, right? Affuso is, again, he's seen as the unofficial mayor of North Bergen, right? People aren't even going to town hall for their problems. They're going to him, right? Again, as the Depression is going on, towns everywhere are given money by the federal government, okay? And it's given to this position called a poor master. So people would go to town halls and basically plead their case on why they need money, right? Why they need social aid. Affuso is giving more money to the residents than the town is giving, right? Like, this is like what he's doing. Now, there were some fears that he would try to run for mayor and turn this town into, like, you know, some major crime hub organization, but those seem to be just rumors. One-term mayor Julius Reich had the North Bergen police watch Affuso and the jungle around the clock, okay? At any time, a North Bergen police officer could be found in the jungle, and oftentimes they were in Affuso's bar. Not really working. Affuso was known, again, to offer aid to anybody, anyone who asked. He opened up his wallet for. Affuso, again, was known knew that being a man of the people, like, these people were going to protect him, okay? And he understood that this was important to growing his beer business venture, and keep it running. However, on December 20th of 1930, this is all going to stop, right? This is all going to come to an end. So we get the shootout at the Chateau, okay? So the Hamilton Chateau is a massive nightlife venue, which is located on 76th Street and Tunnelly Avenue today. So if you go down 76th Street and Tunnelly Avenue, there's that nice brick building on the corner, there's a Chinese restaurant in it. That whole building was once a kind of nightclub, right? So Egan, right? James Egan is another well-known bootlegger, beer runner from Secaucus, and he's looking to move into the northern end of Hudson County, okay? He's also part owner of the Hamilton Chateau, okay? So, and again, this is his main venue in North Bergen. This is where he's making a ton of money, and he realizes the value of this area, okay, to running alcohol. Now, several nights earlier, 4 men, presumably Affuso's, well, they attempt to set the building on fire. There's a night security guard in there that kind of chases them out. They do a little bit of damage, right? Again, this is going to make everything escalate. Now, to make matters more interesting, Affuso is beginning to work with famed gangster Waxy Gordon. Okay, now Gordon is the main importer of Canadian whiskey into the Manhattan area, right? So this guy, he is the real deal, right? He's going to be tied to Lucky Luciano, to Rothstein. He is a real gangster, this guy, right? Not to discredit Affuso, right? But this is like a history textbook gangster, all right? There is a war brewing, all right, between the two men for control over this area. Now, there's a meeting, okay, that is set to discuss dividing up the area. They want to divide the county, okay? The speakeasies, the roadhouses in North Bergen. How could we come to some agreement? Egan, he wants his cut. Affuso does not want to give up his cut, okay? Other beer racketeers, Anthony D'Agostino and Joe Mazzio, right? They're both coming out of Bergen County. These are guys who are controlling that area. They're in attendance at well. The meeting doesn't go very well, okay? Affuso goes with one guy, his bodyguard, personal bodyguard, Philip Ravelli. Both of them are shot, okay? In total, 10 shots are fired into a very crowded restaurant, 2 of which hit Affuso in the stomach and Rivoli gets hit in the leg, okay? Egan was hit once in the chest, but the bullet struck a pocket watch in his breast pocket, right? And again, you can't make this stuff up, right? When the police arrived, everybody's arrested. 35 people were in the bar that night. They arrest the men, the women, the band, the bus boys. Anybody in the building gets arrested, okay? They actually find Affuso crawling across Tunnelly Avenue, right? Tunnelly Avenue is not paved at this time. It's just a dirt road. And he's crawling on his stomach to try to get away, okay? Now, here's what happens. Marcy, right, chief of police comes in, takes over the investigation. He says, look, here's my theories. We got 3 theories, what's going on. Affuso is either provoked, he's going to provoke the attack by D'Agostino and his friends. Second theory is D'Agostino and his friends provoked Affuso, right? Obviously, somebody's got to be the starter of this thing. Affuso stood accused, right, in the gangster code of hijacking D'Agostino's beer trucks, right? You don't rob a fellow criminal, right? Marcy personally investigates the Affuso shooting, right? He interviews Affuso as he's laying in the North Hudson Hospital, Weehawken. Affuso says to him, I don't know where I was shot, inside, outside, or where, okay? Affuso also doesn't name any names, right? He doesn't say who's there, right? The police know who's there because they arrest everybody. But they ask him, he's like, I don't know who's there. There's a lot of people there, right? Marcy knew Egan, D'Agostino were attempting to muscle in on Affuso's territories and orders the Hamilton Chateau, Egan's place, and the Rendezvous, Affuso's place, closed until further notice, right? Marcy does not want North Bergen turning into the Wild West, right? Although it kind of already is at this point. He doesn't want shootouts all over the place. West New York's chief of police, Charles Hangley, he's going to close Affuso's other bar that he has in West New York at the corner of Jackson and 62nd Street, which today, ironically, still a bar, right? On December 23rd, James Egan is going to be charged with shooting George Affuso. The same day, Affuso tells reporters, I don't know who shot me, but I'll take care of it. Of the man who did the shooting, right? He's sitting in the hospital with 2 bullets in his stomach. He's like, no, I got it. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of this, right? He continues. The press is they're going to go after him. Come on, what do you know, who did it? What are you going to do? Because I don't know who shot me. And I wouldn't tell you if I did, right? Real, like, gangster stuff here. Like, this guy is, legit. Right now, the investigation keeps going on. Affuso stays in the hospital under strict security detail. There are Weehawken, North Bergen, Hudson County, and state officials all throughout the building, okay? They are all there watching us, okay? However, time is now going to be on Affuso's side. He's shot in the abdomen, all right, in the 30s. This is like not, you don't end well when this happens, all right? He's going to die from his wounds on December 29th, 1930. He's going to pass away in the hospital. After the autopsy, they find a .32 caliber bullet removed from him. And again, the county now begins working on finding the gun that fires it. Okay, 2 guns were found at the scene. Neither are .32. Okay, the county took some of Chief Marcy's theories, but they think Rivoli actually shot him in the middle of the fight. okay? Again, there's no evidence that Rivoli had a 32 caliber weapon with him. They're just like, well, he's here. He probably did it, right? And there's a reason he got shot as well. Now, his funeral, right? As the investigation is going on, they hold a funeral for Affuso. Okay, the Catholic Church actually passes or denies his funeral. They were like, "We're not hosting your funeral in a church." Okay, that's because during Prohibition, they actually adopt a practice where churches will not hold funerals for lawbreakers. Right? They will not allow you to be, the funeral rites, to take place. So instead, they hold it in Affuso's house. Okay. His casket rested on an elaborate flower deck stand in the parlor of his home. Okay. The funeral was attended by, and again, this is a report, a number of well-known characters, as well as a number of less prominent persons from the North Bergen jungle section. Okay. So the reports are even now going, Affuso's dead. They don't have to show any respect to anybody anymore. Now they're going after his people. Okay. There were 40 cars in his funeral procession. 8 of them were flower cars. Okay. The procession was even given a police escort. Okay. He was buried in Grove Church Cemetery, which the Jersey Journal is going to describe. A narrow grave in Grove Church Cemetery received all that remained yesterday of the grinning, rowdy bad boy of gangland who violated all the rules, even of his own confreres, except that one not to be a squealer, right? That was at the end of the story. Okay, now here's what goes on. As the funeral procession makes its way through North Bergen, down Hudson Boulevard, down Kennedy Boulevard, people line the street to see the beer baron one last time. Okay, even Julius Wright, the mayor, makes his way from Town Hall to 46th Street to give his last respects. And that's about as far as he's going to go. During the burial, the Affuso family actually makes a donation to Father Borgatti of Our Lady of Libra Church to bless the silver-colored coffin, all right, as he's lowered in. Plainclothes North Bergen police officers, they're all mixed in. There's no reports of them having to spy on anybody. It seems they just went to the funeral, right? And again, this was a former officer for a short time, but it was also somebody who welcomed them into his bar, right? 250 people went to the funeral, okay? They were in the cemetery. The reports say the quiet sobbing of his wife was reported as they lowered the casket down, right? Now, murder is still unsolved to this day, right? There's never enough evidence. Okay, as they're investigating the death, state of New Jersey starts cracking down on Hudson County speakeasy immediately after his death. Barely 2 weeks, 25 bars are shut down. Okay, by the 23rd, Egan posts $10,000 bail, which was fundraised by a relative, right? Most people believed this was coming from his friend DiAugustino, right, and the Bergen County racketeers, right? That's where this money was coming from. Egan reopens the Chateau as a Chinese restaurant called Moi Pies, right, which continued to serve alcohol. However, again, the investigation goes on for several long months, and there's no evidence to hold Egan on the crime. Okay, he's acquitted by a grand jury, and murder charges are dropped. By this time, Prohibition's ending. Egan, though, loses most of his influence because now, again, bars can open up. You don't need the underground flow of alcohol anymore. He slowly drifts from the limelight of the Hudson County bar scene and became like just a thug. And he was in and out of jail, petty crimes, and will die in 1937. Okay. Now, North Bergen's gangster, right? Affuso's legacy, right? Today, there's really nothing about Affuso outside of what we're doing here tonight. Okay. His reputation disappears with time and the shifting demographics of the town. But again, he's the stuff of the gangster movies are made out of. Okay. He operates at least 3 speakeasies personally that I could find. The 101, 49 Club, and Radio Frank's, right? He controlled the flow of beer and liquor into North Hudson County, and he is going to fight to the death, literally to his own death, to keep it that way. He's a racketeer. He's a bootlegger. He's a heistman, right? And he made North Bergen his territory, and he took it. He took it, no questions asked, right? Now, We shouldn't be celebrating a criminal. Like that doesn't seem right. Okay. But the story's just too interesting, right? He's a lawman turned into a gangster, which is something you don't hear. Like that's a story. It's not an actual reality. And that's his life. Okay. The gangsters are of the 20s. They're a piece of American culture, right? Chicago has Al Capone. New York City has Lucky Luciano, right? Memphis has Machine Gun Kelly, right? North Bergen will always have the beer baron, George Affuso. And there he is, all right, in all his toughness. That's after his third or fourth arrest. They finally put his picture in the paper. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't look like a big guy, but he looks like a guy who could take a punch and probably deliver a punch. Yeah. That is all I have for you on the exciting life of George Affuso. I think that's a really interesting question because, listen, honestly, I think if he's never accused of this, he probably lives a pretty quiet life as a police officer. Like, does his time and that's it, retires and sails off into the sunset. Right, exactly. Right. Yeah. Right. It had to do something to him, right? Where he figures, I did everything right, still got hosed. I'm just going to do whatever I want now at this point, right? It's a real interesting take. All right. Oh, thank you. Sure. Okay. Sure. Okay. So why is North Bergen the epicenter of alcohol production? Okay. So there's really a great reason why. We have a lot of good hiding spots. Okay. There are reports of stills being found out where present day West Side Avenue is. Okay. In the 20s, there is no West Side Avenue. Tunnelly Avenue is the furthest out you could go. So it's all swamp and woodland out there. There is tons of stuff probably still hidden out there that somebody forgot about 100 years ago, right? So you have that. There's also in this area a really bizarre tradition that they used to practice here. They don't do it, they haven't done it in a very long time. There used to be mushroom cultivation here, okay? All along the river and all along what I would say would be like the backside of like Kennedy Boulevard today, like that stretch of Durham Avenue from about like 67th Street up, right? You know, when you're coming up over the hill, it comes down, right? They did mushroom cultivation back there. Now, the way they cultivated mushrooms back then was they dug into the sides of the cliffs and created these massive tunnels, right? It's a great hiding spot, right? It's a great place to store things, right? Even a lot of the breweries that were here during and before Prohibition, they dug massive tunnel systems into the side of the Palisades because that's how you kept beer cold. There's no refrigeration. Bluestone's cold year round, right? And the way they would do it was they would carry it way in the back end of these tunnels, cover them with ice, big blocks of ice, and cover it with hay and leave it there for weeks on end. Need a case of beer, right? Need a keg of beer? I got you. And they would run and get one from one of these locations, and then nobody knew, right? No one knew it was there, right? Probably the most famous one today is long gone, so nobody go looking for it. All right, I tried. All right, it's where the Galaxy buildings are located. There was a tunnel on record going 75 feet into the Palisades. And when they built the Galaxy, they walled it off, completely closed, still there, right? Yes, there is one located on Durham Avenue near 70th Street. It is behind a very well fenced off area. And somebody several years ago had the brilliant idea to put a drop gate in front of it. So there's a tunnel there that was built by the Rock Cellar Brewing Park, which was a brewery kind of where the new 7-Eleven on Kennedy Boulevard is, right? Where McGuire Chevrolet is. that was a brewery and kind of pleasure resort. That tunnel is still there. Rumor says it's about 50 feet deep. Then there's some people who say, no, there's twists and turns in it. I tried to go into it as a kid, but you'd get scared and you'd run out because it was pitch black. Now that I'm an adult, it's all fenced off and nobody will let me in. No matter what I tell them is in there. Like there's 1920s booze in there. No, I go write a book. But yeah, no, they are still there. Union City has probably the most extensive one. If you're ever in Union City, and it's now a storage building, but it's the old William Peters Brewery. So it is near Cantello Street, right by like where the helix is for the tunnel. There's a gigantic white building. It's painted white. That's the old William Peters Brewery system. That goes probably 4 stories underground, where they would store beer in there for months. Or during Prohibition, ice cream was being stored in the bottom. When they built the new Union City High School on Kennedy Boulevard, where the old Roosevelt Stadium was, prior to that being Roosevelt Stadium, that was Hudson County Consumers Brewery, right? Which, when they leveled Roosevelt Stadium and started digging down, they realized, oh, there's a foundation here. And then they dug down a little more and they went, oh, there's a basement. And then they dug down a little more, laid the footings for high school, and went, oh, there's another basement. And then, there's a tunnel that jut off across Summit Ave behind the building. So these places are around. When it comes to some of the speakeasies that were here that had hidden areas, there is one. It was converted into a house. The family actually reached out to us. The bar was called the Old Red Mill. And it's downtown around like 5th Street and Patterson Plank Road, down that, all the way down. That basement had sub-basement and rooms cut off into it, where they would have stored alcohol, among a lot of other things. But that building has got a really interesting history. It's like not a PG night. There's kids in the room. I can't go into more detail, but I mean, this stuff is still littered in this area, right? This Prohibition history. So I hope that answered it. Sure. Okay, so in the process of finding this, right, it looked like in North Bergen and Guttenberg, it was like established businesses that just were like, hey, we were a bar, Prohibition's here, and now we're a soda shop, right? Until, the right guy comes in, until the password is said, so to say, right? Union City had a lot where it was noted that they were in the basements of buildings. So I think Union City kept that's like your traditional, like, you had to know a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy, right? But they were everywhere, right? It was almost like, okay, well, this one's shut down, so now you got to go over here, right? Oh, this one's closed, so you got to go back to the original one. Weirdly enough, a lot of the buildings that are listed in these reports, like, they're all still there for the most part, these original buildings. Only, like, I would say maybe like 30 or so are completely gone, right? But a lot of these original speakeasy bar buildings, like, they're still there. Like, the building is there, the structure is there, whether the residents know or the owners know or what have you, but like, that history is still pretty much there. You physically can still go see it. Sure. Oh yeah, this area was littered with breweries. You had William Peter in Union City. You had Bremer's Brewery in Weehawken, which one of their buildings is still in existence. It's a hardware store now. You had smaller breweries in West New York, like I'm talking real small. You had the North Bergen Brewery, which would have been where North Bergen High School is today. Sea Caucus had a couple of small breweries. Jersey City had a bunch of them, right? There was a ton of breweries in Jersey City. No. William Peters, Bremer's, these guys are global, right? These guys are shipping right off of the Hudson. This stuff is going around the world. North Bergen Brewery, local, right? Some of the Western ones, that's neighborhood stuff. Lembeck down in Jersey City, that was a massive brewery, huge. So there was legit brewing competition here. And again, you look at the history, especially turn of the 20th century, this area is predominantly German, right? And all these folks are bringing that beer, that German beer tradition here. Oddly enough, and it's kind of interesting when you look at what beers they're making, none of them are making the same beer, right? Which kind of goes like you would think like, well, oh, they don't want competition, right? But it actually goes into like where they're immigrating from, right? So some are making lagers, some are making bocks, some are making pilsners, right? And it's where I'm from. This is what I know how to make. So that's that. It was a really weird time, a very interesting time, pre World War II in this area. Sure. Sure. So why are people not turning against him? I honestly think people are afraid of him. I think he's developed a reputation like, yeah, I was going to court and I still beat up a cop on top of it, right? Um, Plus the Affusos, there's a bunch of them, right? It's George and John, the two brothers. What's that? Yeah, but there's a lot of other Affusos that are there, cousins. Like there's a lot of people where it's like you have to be careful about who you talked about back then in the neighborhood, right? Because somebody's gonna hear who's related, right? So I think there's no turning on him because well, he's a scary dude, right? I think people were nervous that like, all right, like what's he gonna do to me? I'm just like a regular guy down the street, right? And he keeps not going to jail, right? Which I think that's the other part. Like this guy just got a rabbit's foot in his pocket or something, right? He gets acquitted like the first 3 times he goes to jail. I think people started to view him as this like untouchable character. So I think that's honestly why. Ton of cash. Right. Exactly. Exactly. All right. Anybody else? Affuso's dugout. That is George's older brother, John. That is his lineage, right? George never has kids. He's killed. He's 36 years old when he dies, right? And I mean, he's in and out of jail. Really never, I guess, found time for love, right? But John Affuso winds up going and having a family. His son will be the owner of Affuso's dugout, right? So I guess it was a family affair. Like I don't really know. Carried on the Affuso legacy, I guess. It must have been. And John is arrested a lot. Like, don't get me wrong. He's usually arrested for like running beer. Like, he's never really arrested for anything bad. He's not as bad as George was, like beating people up or anything. Like, he was a delivery guy. He was a money mover. Like, he wasn't, blooding up the knuckles, so to say. But he carried on the brother's business in some way, shape, or form. Sure. Yeah. Right. Oh, yeah. Sure. So they had speakeasies where the people could go downstairs and go out to the right door, under the sidewalk and wait for the cops to leave. Oh yeah, absolutely. Right. Oh yeah. Listen, I mean, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's actually a stretch of Bergen Avenue from about like 58th to 57th Street. It's a bunch of storefronts. However, the map shows that there was like 6 speakeasies on that street. The basements are all interconnected, and there's even a hallway that would have connected where the old Modell's was on Bergen to get across the street. Now that was just a bunch of storefronts as well. It wasn't that bigger structure that's there. But there was always a parking lot behind it, which means people were probably ducking out of there and making their way into West New York somewhere. I mean, it is really one of these parts of our history where you're like, how did they do it? Right? Like, and it's really genius. They came up with all these wacky plans, like how to get people in, how to get people out, how to hide it. Should we keep it downstairs? Should we keep it upstairs? Not to put too much weight on them, but if you ever go to Harry's is 2 floors. Right? It's always been 2 floors, right? Harry's was a bar during Prohibition. Like that's an old building. That building's actually built in like 1920s, built in the very start of Prohibition. They opened the bar and it has been a bar forever. It's never been anything else, right? So I mean, that building's probably got a lot of skeletons in their closets, which I wonder if they actually know. So yeah. Well, they have the great Art Deco, style in there that's been in there for a very long time, right? But yeah, who knows, man? There's a secret passageway underneath. I don't know. There'd be some food in there. Yeah, I got a good burger. All right. All right, yeah, guys. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. What's that? Oh, no problem, guys. Glad to be here. Hope to catch you at the next one. All right. See you guys.